My name is Karen Mitchell, 28 years old, and I'm suing my parents for stealing my inheritance. I walked into that courtroom wearing my best designer suit, the one I'd saved 6 months to afford, and watched my parents roll their eyes at each other like I was still their disappointing daughter playing dress-up. My mother whispered something to my father, probably calling me a pathetic attention seeker again, while their team of expensive lawyers smirked behind leather briefcases. But when Judge Harrison looked down at the case file and saw I was suing my own parents for $8 million, his eyes widened behind those wire-rimmed glasses. 3 months ago, I discovered the darkest family secret that would destroy everything. Before we dive into this shocking story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who's also dealt with toxic family members? Hit that like button if you believe family doesn't always mean loyalty, and subscribe to hear more incredible true stories of people who fought back against those who wronged them. Trust me, you won't believe what my own parents were capable of doing. Growing up in Westport, Connecticut, everyone thought we were the perfect American family. My father Robert worked as a successful investment banker on Wall Street, pulling in 7 figures annually, while my mother Linda played the role of charitable socialite, hosting fundraisers and attending country club luncheons. From the outside, the Mitchell family portrait looked flawless, but behind our colonial mansion's doors, I learned early that I was born into the wrong role in their carefully scripted life. The difference in how they treated me versus my younger brother Tyler became obvious by the time I turned 10. When Tyler brought home a participation trophy from soccer practice, they displayed it prominently in the living room cabinet. When I won the state science fair with my renewable energy project, they forgot to attend the ceremony. I still remember standing on that stage, scanning the audience for their faces, only to learn later they'd taken Tyler to get ice cream because he was upset about not playing in his game that day. My academic achievements throughout school meant nothing to them. I graduated valedictorian from high school with a full scholarship to Yale, but at the graduation party they threw, I overheard my mother telling her friends I was going to community college because I couldn't get in anywhere better. When her friend Margaret congratulated me directly about Yale, my mother laughed it off as a misunderstanding, saying I was waitlisted and probably wouldn't get in. The shame in her voice cut deeper than any rejection letter ever could. College became my escape from their suffocating disappointment. At Yale, professors actually valued my intelligence, and I thrived in computer science and business courses. I spent holidays on campus, telling my roommates I was staying to work on projects, rather than admit my parents preferred I didn't come home. During my junior year, I accidentally discovered the trust fund they'd established for Tyler when he was born, worth $200,000 for his future. When I searched for mine, nothing existed. The family lawyer claimed it must have been an oversight, but the date on Tyler's trust showed they'd set it up the same week they found out they were pregnant with me. The only person in my family who saw my worth was grandmother Dorothy, my father's mother. She lived 40 minutes away in a beautiful estate in Greenwich, and I spent every possible weekend with her. Dorothy was everything my parents weren't: warm, encouraging, and genuinely interested in my achievements. She displayed my science fair ribbons in her study and kept every report card I'd ever shown her. During my senior year at Yale, she pulled me aside during Sunday dinner and said something that stuck with me: "You're stronger than they know, sweetheart. One day they'll see what I've always seen in you." After graduating summa cum laude, I landed a position at a tech startup in Manhattan. Within 4 years, I'd worked my way up to become the youngest vice president in the company's history at 26, managing a team of 30 people and overseeing projects worth millions. My salary had grown to $250,000 annually, and I'd finally started feeling successful on my own terms. Yet when my parents introduced me at social events, they told people I worked as a secretary, sometimes adding that I was still trying to find myself. The dynamics shifted suddenly when grandmother Dorothy fell ill with pneumonia that quickly worsened. I took time off work to help care for her, spending nights at the hospital while my parents made excuses about their busy schedules. Tyler was backpacking through Europe on what he called his 3rd gap year, funded entirely by our parents. As Dorothy's condition deteriorated, she became more insistent about speaking with me privately, asking the nurses to ensure we weren't disturbed. Those final conversations would change everything I thought I knew about my family's wealth and the lengths my parents would go to keep it. Dorothy's frail hand gripped mine with surprising strength as she struggled to sit up in her hospital bed. The monitors beeped steadily around us while she waited for the nurse to close the door completely. Her voice, though weakened by illness, carried the same determined tone I'd loved since childhood. "Karen, there's something you need to know before I'm gone. I've made arrangements with my lawyer, James Morrison, and I'm leaving everything to you. The entire estate, all $8 million of it, will be yours." I sat frozen, unable to process what she was saying. The Mitchell family fortune had been built by my great-grandfather's steel company, and Dorothy had inherited everything when my grandfather passed 10 years ago. I'd always assumed it would go to my father as the only child, then eventually be split between Tyler and me. Dorothy seemed to read my thoughts, shaking her head slowly. "I've watched your parents treat you like an unwanted burden for 28 years, sweetheart. I've documented every cruelty, every dismissal, every time they chose your brother over you. They don't deserve a penny of money they'd only use to continue enabling Tyler's laziness while undermining your success." She reached for a manila envelope on her bedside table, her movements deliberate despite the pain medication. Inside were copies of her will, dated 3 months prior, along with a sealed letter addressed to me. "James has the originals in his safe, along with video testimony I recorded explaining my decision. Your parents have been slowly draining my accounts, thinking I wouldn't notice in my old age. They've taken nearly $1 million already through forged checks and unauthorized transfers. I have evidence of everything, including recordings of their plans to put me in the cheapest nursing home they could find once I became too inconvenient." The hospital room door burst open before I could respond. My parents stood there, my mother's face twisted with rage while my father's expression calculated the scene before him. "What are you doing, Mother?" he demanded, noticing the envelope in my hands. "What poison is she feeding you now, Karen?" My mother stalked toward the bed, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum. "We knew you'd try to manipulate her. Dorothy, you're clearly not in your right mind if you're giving family documents to her instead of your own son." Dorothy's eyes blazed with a fury I'd never witnessed before. "Get out of my room, both of you. I'm more lucid than I've ever been, and I see exactly what you are. Thieves and child abusers who've spent decades tormenting your own daughter while spoiling that worthless boy into uselessness." My father's mask of composure slipped as he grabbed for the envelope, but I pulled it against my chest. "You're making a mistake, Mother," he said coldly. "We'll have you declared incompetent. No court will uphold a will that disinherits your own son for his unstable daughter." The stress of the confrontation took its toll on Dorothy's weakened system. Her breathing became labored, and the heart monitor's rhythm grew erratic. Nurses rushed in, pushing my parents and me toward the door, but Dorothy called out for me one last time. "Remember what I said, Karen. You're stronger than they know. James Morrison, don't forget that name." Those were the last words she spoke to me. She passed away 2 hours later with me holding her hand while my parents made phone calls in the hallway, already plotting their next moves. The war began before Dorothy's body was even cold. My father cornered James Morrison at the funeral home, demanding to see the will immediately. When James informed him that Dorothy's instructions were clear about reading it formally after the service, my mother caused a scene that had other mourning families staring. They spread rumors throughout their social circle that I'd manipulated a dying woman, isolating her from her family in her final days to steal their rightful inheritance. Tyler flew back from Europe for the funeral, and I watched my parents coach him in the parking lot before the service. During the reception, he approached me with fake tears, claiming Dorothy had promised to fund his art studio and now I was destroying his dreams. When I tried to explain that I hadn't asked for any of this, he laughed and said, "Come on, Karen. We all know you've been planning this for years." The favorite granddaughter act finally paid off, didn't it? The will reading took place a week later in James Morrison's downtown office. My parents arrived with their own legal team, confident they could overturn whatever Dorothy had decided. but James was prepared for their assault. He played Dorothy's video testimony first, where she clearly and articulately explained her decision, detailing specific instances of my parents' cruelty toward me and their financial exploitation of her. She'd included bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals, copies of forged documents, and even secret recordings of my parents discussing their plans to liquidate her assets. My mother stood up halfway through the video, screaming that it was fabricated, that I'd somehow coerced Dorothy into this elaborate scheme. My father's lawyer, Harold Whitman, immediately filed papers challenging Dorothy's mental competency and my undue influence. They accused me of elder abuse, claiming I'd isolated Dorothy from her family and poisoned her mind against them. The allegations were so severe that Adult Protective Services opened an investigation, and suddenly I was the one under scrutiny. Within days, my carefully built life began crumbling. My parents used their connections to plant stories in local papers about their gold-digging daughter who'd manipulated her dying grandmother. They hired a public relations firm to manage their image as grieving family members betrayed by their own child. The narrative they spun was so compelling that even some of Dorothy's friends began questioning what really happened in those final weeks. The betrayal reached new depths when Monica Chen, my best friend since college, showed up at my apartment with an apologetic expression that didn't reach her eyes. We'd shared everything for 6 years, from career struggles to failed relationships, so when she said she'd been contacted by my parents' lawyers, my blood ran cold. They offered me $50,000, Karen, she admitted, not quite meeting my gaze. All I have to do is testify that you talked about getting your grandmother's money, that you had a plan. The revelation that my parents had bought my best friend's loyalty shattered something fundamental inside me. But Monica was just the beginning of their orchestrated campaign. Derek Sullivan, whom I'd dated for 2 years before our amicable breakup, suddenly emerged with claims that I'd been emotionally abusive and manipulative throughout our relationship. His new story, clearly scripted by my parents' legal team, painted me as a calculating woman who used people for personal gain. The fact that we'd remained friendly after our split, even attending each other's promotion parties, apparently meant nothing when faced with the right price. My parents' next move targeted my professional life with surgical precision. They contacted the CEO of my company, Richard Hayes, claiming I was under investigation for elder abuse and fraud. Despite my spotless performance record and the millions in revenue I'd generated, Richard called me into his office with HR present. "We can't have this kind of scandal associated with the company," he said, sliding a termination letter across his desk. "Clean out your office today. Security will escort you." 5 years of dedication evaporated in 5 minutes. The financial assault continued when my bank accounts were suddenly frozen due to a fraud investigation initiated by my parents' legal team. They claimed I'd been siphoning money from Dorothy's accounts for months, producing doctored evidence that made me look guilty. Without access to my savings or ability to use credit cards, I went from successful executive to homeless within 2 weeks. My landlord, pressured by threatening letters from my parents' lawyers about harboring a suspected criminal, gave me 48 hours to vacate despite my perfect rental history. Living in my car in various parking lots around the city, I watched my parents move into Dorothy's Greenwich estate, claiming they needed to secure the property during the legal proceedings. They posted photos on social media of themselves maintaining dear mother's legacy, while selling off her antique collection and artwork to fund their legal assault against me. The local newspaper ran a sympathetic piece about their struggle to protect their mother's estate from a greedy daughter. My salvation came in the unlikely form of Rosa Martinez, a private investigator who'd been following the case in the news. She approached me in a coffee shop where I was using the Wi-Fi to search for lawyers, sliding her business card across the table. "I specialize in financial crimes within families," she said quietly. "Your story doesn't add up the way your parents are telling it. I think you're being framed, and I want to help prove it." Her offer to work on contingency, taking payment only if we won, gave me the first hope I'd felt in weeks. Rosa's investigation uncovered a pattern of financial manipulation stretching back years. My parents hadn't just stolen from Dorothy, they'd systematically targeted elderly relatives throughout the family tree. Uncle Carl's sudden death 10 years ago, originally attributed to a heart attack, looked suspicious when Rosa discovered he'd been planning to change his will the week he died. His entire estate had gone to my parents after a last-minute codicil appeared, despite his children's protests. The similarity to Dorothy's situation was undeniable. The intimidation escalated when I started meeting with Rosa regularly. Strange cars followed me from parking lot to parking lot. My temporary phone received threatening messages from blocked numbers, warning me to drop the case or face consequences. One night, someone slashed all 4 tires on my car, leaving a note that simply said stop. The police claimed they couldn't investigate without more evidence, though I suspected my father's connections in law enforcement played a role in their indifference. Cousin Bradley, who'd always been the black sheep of the family, reached out through Rosa with crucial information. He'd been at a family dinner where my parents openly discussed their plan to frame me, believing everyone present shared their views. Bradley had secretly recorded the entire conversation on his phone, capturing my mother saying, "Dorothy's video testimony won't matter when we prove Karen's unstable. We've already got the psychiatrist ready to testify." The recording was damning, but Bradley feared retribution if he came forward publicly. Elena Rodriguez, who'd been my nanny from ages 3 to 12, contacted Rosa after seeing news coverage of the case. She'd kept journals during her employment, documenting instances of neglect and emotional abuse I'd suffered. "I almost called child services so many times," she admitted tearfully. "But they always threatened to deport me if I said anything. I've carried this guilt for 16 years. Her detailed records corroborated Dorothy's claims about my parents' treatment, providing independent verification of the pattern. My parents' legal team filed a restraining order preventing me from attending Dorothy's funeral, claiming my presence would cause emotional distress. I sat in my car outside the cemetery gates, watching limousines arrive while armed security guards ensured I couldn't say goodbye to the only family member who'd ever truly loved me. Inside, according to Bradley's later report, my parents played the role of devoted mourners while already calculating the estate's value. The complete destruction of my life seemed nearly accomplished when Tyler approached me in a grocery store parking lot with an offer. "Just sign over your claim to the inheritance," he said, holding out papers. "They'll drop all the charges, unfreeze your accounts, even give you $100,000 to start over somewhere else. You can't win this, Karen. They've got judges, cops, everyone in their pocket. Take the deal and disappear." His casual confidence that I'd surrender revealed how little he knew about the strength Dorothy had always seen in me. Finding legal representation willing to challenge my parents' powerful attorneys seemed impossible until Marcus Thompson answered my desperate email. A former corporate lawyer who'd switched to fighting financial exploitation cases after his own grandmother was swindled, Marcus met me in a diner parking lot to review my evidence. "They've made one crucial mistake," he said after studying Rosa's findings. "They got greedy and sloppy. We can use that." He agreed to take my case pro bono, seeing parallels to his own family's pain. My parents responded to Marcus filing official representation papers by escalating their legal assault. They filed an emergency restraining order claiming I was stalking and harassing them, using edited security footage from Dorothy's estate to make it appear I'd been lurking around the property. The judge granted it without allowing me to present counter-evidence, effectively barring me from entering Greenwich entirely. This prevented me from attending important hearings at the probate court located in the same jurisdiction. The revelation that Judge William Foster, who'd been assigned our case, had received significant campaign contributions from my father's investment firm should have been grounds for recusal. But when Marcus filed the motion, Foster dismissed it as a frivolous attempt to delay proceedings. He scheduled hearings at times when he knew I couldn't attend due to the restraining order, then held my absence against me. The corruption ran so deep that even court clerks seemed hostile, accidentally losing our filed documents multiple times. Everything changed when Foster suffered a mild stroke and the case was reassigned to Judge Patricia Chen, a newer appointee with a reputation for independence. My parents' lawyer Harold Whitman immediately filed for another reassignment, claiming Chen lacked experience in complex estate matters. When that failed, they tried more desperate measures. Chin later revealed someone had attempted to break into her home office, likely trying to plant compromising material. The most devastating blow came when Tyler approached me outside Marcus's office with what he claimed was a peace offering. "I feel terrible about how this has spiraled," he said, seeming genuinely remorseful. "Maybe we can work out something between us, without all these lawyers." Against Marcus's advice, I met Tyler for coffee, hoping family loyalty might finally surface. Instead, he'd worn a wire and tried to get me to say anything incriminating about Dorothy's mental state. When I realized the setup, the betrayal cut deeper than any legal maneuver. My parents' next tactic involved forging my signature on settlement documents, then claiming I'd agreed to drop all claims in exchange for $50,000. The forgery was sophisticated enough that even handwriting experts initially authenticated it. But Rosa's investigation revealed the notary who'd allegedly witnessed my signature had been out of the country that day. The deeper we dug, the more evidence emerged of an entire network of professionals willing to commit crimes for the right price. Judge Chin ordered a comprehensive review of all evidence, bringing in independent forensic accountants to examine the financial records. My parents tried to block this by claiming attorney-client privilege over clearly personal documents. When that failed, they accused Marcus of tampering with evidence, filing bar complaints that threatened his ability to practice law. The stress began affecting his health, but he refused to abandon my case. The discovery that my parents had been paying a psychiatrist named Dr. Gerald Hoffman to create false medical records about my mental health shocked even Marcus. Hoffman had never met me, yet he'd prepared detailed reports diagnosing me with multiple personality disorders. The plan was to have me involuntarily committed if I continued fighting the inheritance. When we subpoenaed Hoffman, he fled the state rather than testify under oath. Rosa's investigation took a dangerous turn when she discovered my parents had connections to genuinely dangerous people. Her car was vandalized, her office broken into, and her daughter followed home from school. But Rosa had grown up in a tough neighborhood and refused to be intimidated. She moved her family to a safe location and doubled down on the investigation, now personally invested in exposing what she called the worst case of family corruption I've ever seen. A breakthrough came when Dorothy's personal banker, William Morrison, agreed to testify about the suspicious patterns he'd noticed. He'd tried to warn Dorothy about the unauthorized transactions, but my parents had convinced her he was mistaken, claiming they were managing her finances with her permission. His record showed a clear timeline of escalating theft, with transfers always coincidentally timed just before Dorothy's medical appointments when she'd be too distracted to notice. My mother tried a different approach by suddenly claiming she wanted to make amends. She showed up at Marcus's office tearfully declaring she'd been forced to go along with my father's schemes. But when she couldn't produce any evidence of coercion and refused to testify against him, her true motives became clear. She was trying to create reasonable doubt about who was really responsible, potentially allowing both parents to escape consequences. The forensic accountant's preliminary report revealed the scope of my parents' crimes extended far beyond Dorothy's estate. They'd been running what amounted to a family financial crime syndicate for over 15 years, targeting elderly relatives and family friends. The money trail led to offshore accounts in the Caymans and Switzerland, professionally laundered through my father's investment firm. What started as a fight over my inheritance had exposed a criminal enterprise worth tens of millions. Tyler finally cracked under the pressure when investigators found evidence he'd been embezzling from the fake charity my parents established in Dorothy's name. Faced with potential prison time for his own crimes, he agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. But my parents had anticipated this betrayal. They'd structured everything to make Tyler appear solely responsible if caught, keeping their own hands technically clean through careful legal distance. As the trial date approached, my parents made one last desperate attempt to force a settlement. They had their new lawyer, Vincent Crawford, known for his scorched earth tactics, file a motion claiming I'd violated the restraining order. They produced a clearly doctored photo showing me near their property. When the photo analysis proved it was fabricated, Crawford claimed it was an honest mistake, but the judge's patience had finally worn thin. She warned that any more false allegations would result in contempt charges. The night before the trial was scheduled to begin, I sat in the motel room Rosa had secured for me, surrounded by boxes of evidence we'd compiled over months of investigation. My life had been completely destroyed, rebuilt, and destroyed again in cycles of legal warfare. But Dorothy's words echoed in my mind, giving me strength for the final battle. Tomorrow, in that courtroom, the truth would finally have its day. The morning James Morrison called about Dorothy's secret safety deposit box felt like divine intervention. "I've been going through Dorothy's papers more thoroughly," he explained, his voice tight with excitement. "She left instructions in a sealed envelope only to be opened if the will was contested. There's a safety deposit box at Chase Manhattan that nobody knew existed. Within hours, Marcus had obtained a court order to access it, and what we found inside changed everything." Dorothy had been methodically documenting my parents' abuse for over 5 years. The box contained a small digital recorder with dozens of audio files, each meticulously labeled with dates and descriptions. The first recording made my blood run cold, my parents discussing how to manipulate Dorothy into signing over power of attorney while she was sedated after minor surgery. My father's voice was clear: "Once we have control, we can move the money gradually. She'll never notice if we're careful." The most damning evidence was a video Dorothy had secretly recorded just 2 weeks before her death. She'd hidden a camera in her living room while my parents visited, capturing them threatening her with a nursing home if she didn't comply with their financial demands. "You're going to die alone and forgotten in some Medicare hellhole," my mother snarled at the woman who'd given them everything. "Unless you stop this nonsense about leaving money to that ungrateful brat." The elder abuse was undeniable, recorded in high definition. Judge Chin ordered an immediate halt to all asset transfers from Dorothy's estate while the new evidence was reviewed. My parents' lawyer Harold Whitman watched the video in court with growing horror, realizing his clients had lied to him about everything. During a recess, court security cameras caught him in a heated argument with my parents in the hallway. By the time court reconvened, Whitman had formally withdrawn from the case, citing irreconcilable differences with his clients. Their new lawyer, Vincent Crawford, tried to claim the recordings were inadmissible, arguing Dorothy had violated wiretapping laws. But Judge Chin pointed out that Connecticut was a one-party consent state and Dorothy had every right to record conversations in her own home. Crawford then pivoted to attacking Dorothy's mental state, suggesting the recordings proved paranoia. This strategy backfired spectacularly when the forensic psychologist who reviewed the materials testified that Dorothy showed remarkable clarity and strategic thinking. Aunt Judith, my father's sister who'd initially supported my parents, asked to meet with Marcus privately. She arrived at his office visibly shaking, explaining that my parents had threatened to expose her teenage son's stint in rehab if she didn't corroborate their version of events. They said they'd make sure he never got into college, that everyone would know he was a drug addict, she sobbed. Her testimony about their blackmail tactics added another layer to the pattern of family manipulation. Monica Chen approached me outside the courthouse during a lunch break, unable to meet my eyes. "I need to tell the truth," she said quietly. "They didn't just offer money. They said they'd destroy my career, claimed they had connections at every tech company in the city." She returned the $50,000 with interest and agreed to testify about how my parents had coached her to lie. Her accounting of their detailed instructions revealed how carefully they'd orchestrated each betrayal. The offshore account investigation yielded shocking results when Swiss authorities, under pressure from U.S. law enforcement, agreed to share banking records. My parents had systematically looted not just from Dorothy, but from 6 other elderly relatives over 15 years. The sophisticated money laundering scheme used my father's legitimate investment firm as cover, mixing stolen funds with legal trades. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit officially opened their own investigation based on our evidence. Officer Martinez, who'd initially dismissed my harassment complaints, came forward after reviewing the case files. "I was pressured to ignore the reports," he admitted to Internal Affairs. "Told it was a family matter that would sort itself out." His testimony revealed that my father had multiple contacts in the police department who'd been paid to look the other way. 3 officers were suspended pending investigation, and the department faced serious questions about corruption. The revelation that Tyler had been secretly recording our parents for months stunned everyone, including me. Terrified of becoming their next target after helping them attack me, he'd started documenting conversations as insurance. His recordings captured them discussing how to frame me for embezzlement, plant evidence of drug abuse, and even considering staging a car accident to eliminate me as a threat. The casual nature with which they discussed potentially murdering their own daughter shocked even hardened court personnel. Dr. Williams, the psychiatrist they'd tried to bribe into declaring me mentally incompetent, provided crucial testimony about their attempted manipulation. They offered me $100,000 to say their daughter was dangerously unstable, he stated under oath. When I refused, they threatened to have my license revoked through false malpractice claims. His recorded conversations with my parents demonstrated their willingness to corrupt medical professionals for personal gain. Dorothy's estate lawyer revealed she'd actually created 2 wills, anticipating my parents might try to forge documents. The second will, stored in a different location with authentication videos, matched the first exactly. But Dorothy had added a provision that if anyone contested her bequests using false allegations, they would receive nothing. This clause, which my parents had overlooked in their haste, meant their challenge automatically disqualified them from any inheritance. Rosa's investigation into my parents' charity fraud uncovered a network of fake nonprofits they'd used to solicit donations from Dorothy's wealthy friends. The Dorothy Mitchell Foundation for Youth Arts had raised over $3 million, none of which went to any youth programs. Instead, the money funded Tyler's European travels, my mother's plastic surgery, and my father's gambling debts. Donors began filing their own lawsuits as the scandal widened. The discovery of Uncle Carl's real will in Dorothy's safety deposit box proved he'd intended to leave everything to his children, not my parents. Dorothy had suspected foul play and kept the original document, along with a letter from Carl expressing fear for his life. "If something happens to me, investigate Robert and Linda," he'd written 2 weeks before his death. The cold case unit reopened his death as a potential homicide. My parents' marriage disintegrated under the pressure of exposure. Court cameras captured my mother physically attacking my father when she learned he'd been hiding assets from her too. She screamed about affairs with his secretaries, cocaine habits funded by stolen money, and bribes to city officials. He responded by revealing her prescription drug dealing operation run through her yoga studio connections. Their mutual destruction provided more evidence than any investigation could have uncovered. As witnesses lined up to testify against them, my parents made one final attempt to flee. Airport security detained them trying to board a flight to Costa Rica with fake passports and cash hidden in their luggage. The arrest photos showing them in handcuffs at JFK made headlines across Connecticut. The golden couple of Greenwich society had fallen spectacularly, and their mugshots revealed the ugly truth behind their polished facades. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity on the first day of trial, with reporters filling every available seat and Dorothy's friends standing along the walls. My parents arrived in matching designer suits, projecting confidence despite their house arrest ankle monitors. They'd hired a media consultant to manage their image, but no amount of polish could hide the desperation in their eyes when they saw the prosecution's evidence table loaded with boxes of documents. I took the witness stand first, my voice steady as I recounted 28 years of emotional abuse and neglect. Marcus guided me through specific instances, each corroborated by documents, recordings, or witness testimony. When Crawford tried to paint me as a bitter daughter seeking revenge, I calmly responded with facts and dates, letting the evidence speak louder than any emotional display. The jury watched intently as I explained discovering my parents' theft only while trying to protect Dorothy. The moment Dorothy's video testimony played changed the entire atmosphere of the courtroom. Her clear, articulate explanation of why she'd disinherited her son in favor of me contradicted every claim my parents had made about her mental state. Several jurors wiped tears as Dorothy described watching them torment me throughout childhood, her voice breaking when she apologized for not intervening sooner. When she looked directly at the camera and said, "Karen is the only honest person in this family," my father slammed his fist on the defense table. My parents' former business partner, George Hamilton, testified about suspicious transactions he'd noticed over the years. Robert always had explanations, but they never quite added up, he stated. When I started asking harder questions, he bought out my stake in the firm. Hamilton produced emails showing my father discussing how to hide money transfers, using code words they'd developed. The FBI agent present took careful notes as Hamilton outlined what appeared to be a massive financial conspiracy. Tyler's testimony proved devastating to our parents' defense. Granted immunity for his cooperation, he detailed how they'd groomed him from childhood to participate in their schemes. They taught me that family meant taking whatever we could get, he said, his voice hollow. Karen was the enemy because she wouldn't play along. His description of secret family meetings where they plotted against elderly relatives painted a picture of calculated criminality spanning decades. Judge Chen had to call multiple recesses as shocking revelations emerged. My mother's secretary, Paula Morrison, testified about creating fake charity documents and forging donor signatures. The yoga studio employees described my mother forcing them to sell prescription pills to wealthy clients. My father's IT specialist admitted to hacking into my email and social media accounts to monitor my activities and plant incriminating messages that were never sent. The forensic accountant's presentation transformed complex financial crimes into a clear narrative the jury could follow. Using charts and graphs, she showed how my parents had stolen over $12 million from various family members over 15 years. The money trail led through dozens of shell companies and offshore accounts, each transaction carefully documented. When she revealed they'd even stolen from Tyler's college fund to cover their tracks, my brother broke down in the gallery. Crawford made a desperate attempt to salvage the case by claiming I wasn't Robert's biological daughter. My mother stood up dramatically, declaring she'd had an affair and I deserved nothing from the Mitchell family fortune. But Marcus was prepared, producing a paternity test I'd taken months earlier when my parents first threatened this tactic. The results confirmed Robert was indeed my father, and my mother's willingness to lie about something so fundamental destroyed any remaining credibility. My father's secretary, Jennifer Walsh, provided the most emotionally devastating testimony. She'd been forced into an affair with him under threat of deportation, enduring years of abuse while gathering evidence of his crimes. Her recordings of him bragging about manipulating Dorothy and planning to deal with Karen permanently led to additional attempted murder charges. The courtroom gasped when she played audio of him discussing hiring someone to tamper with my car brakes. As the prosecution's case built to its crescendo, my parents turned on each other completely. My mother's lawyer filed a motion to sever her case from my father's, claiming she was also a victim of his manipulation. She took the stand against advice of counsel, unleashing years of resentment. He controlled everything, she screamed. The theft, the fraud, even making me lie about Karen's paternity. Her testimony revealed my father's connections to organized crime figures who'd helped launder the stolen money. My father responded by producing documents showing my mother had been embezzling from him too, maintaining secret accounts funded by their joint criminal activities. He claimed she'd orchestrated Uncle Carl's death after discovering Carl planned to expose her prescription drug network. The mutual accusations created a circular firing squad that delighted prosecutors. Each parent's attempt to save themselves provided more evidence of their guilt. Eleanor Rodriguez testified about my mother attempting to poison Dorothy slowly with interactions between her legitimate medications and illegally obtained drugs. As Dorothy's visiting nurse, Eleanor had noticed unusual symptoms and reported them, only to be fired by my parents. Her meticulous notes and saved medication samples proved attempted murder. The realization that my parents had been actively trying to kill Dorothy while I fought to protect her brought me to tears for the first time during the trial. Character witnesses for the prosecution included teachers, professors, and colleagues who testified about my integrity and achievements despite family obstacles. The contrast with witnesses forced to testify for my parents under subpoena was stark. Their own friends reluctantly admitted suspecting financial impropriety but being too afraid of social consequences to speak up. Greenwich's elite had enabled my parents' crimes through willful blindness. The defense's case crumbled when their star witness, a psychiatrist named Dr. Sarah Brennan, admitted under cross-examination that she'd never actually evaluated me. She'd prepared her testimony based solely on my parents' descriptions and fabricated medical records. When Marcus presented her with evidence of the falsified documents, she broke down and admitted my parents had threatened to destroy her career if she didn't cooperate. In a last desperate move, Crawford tried to argue that even if my parents had committed crimes, Dorothy's will should still be invalidated because of her emotional state. But when he called his own forensic psychologist to testify, the expert concluded that Dorothy's documented evidence collection showed exceptional mental acuity. This level of strategic planning indicates someone fully aware of their circumstances and acting to protect their interests, he admitted reluctantly. The judge had to clear the courtroom when my father lunged at my mother after she revealed he'd been planning to divorce her and frame her for all the financial crimes. Security officers restrained him as he screamed threats that further incriminated him. The image of my parents being dragged from court in handcuffs while cursing each other became the defining moment of the trial. Their carefully constructed facades had finally, completely shattered. Judge Chen's verdict was decisive and comprehensive. She ruled entirely in my favor, ordering my parents to return all stolen assets plus treble damages for their criminal conduct. The $8 million inheritance from Dorothy was mine, along with an additional $15 million in damages and recovered stolen funds from other victims. But more importantly, she referred the case for criminal prosecution on charges including elder abuse, fraud, attempted murder, and racketeering. The criminal trial proceeded swiftly given the overwhelming evidence we'd compiled. Prosecutors painted a picture of a criminal enterprise masquerading as a respectable family. My father received 15 years in federal prison for financial crimes, with additional state charges pending for Uncle Carl's death. My mother got 12 years, though her sentence was extended when she attacked another inmate who mentioned my name. Both lost their professional licenses permanently and faced lawsuits from dozens of victims. Tyler's path to redemption began with intensive therapy to deprogram the toxic lessons our parents had taught him. In court-mandated counseling, he finally understood how they'd weaponized him against me while simultaneously stealing his future. His genuine remorse led to us slowly rebuilding a relationship neither of us thought possible. He testified in the criminal trial, helping secure convictions, and used his immunity deal to start fresh. I established the Dorothy Mitchell Foundation for Elder Protection using $5 million from the settlement. Unlike my parents' fake charities, ours provided real services, free legal aid for elderly financial abuse victims, investigative services for families suspecting exploitation, and educational programs about recognizing manipulation tactics. Rosa became our head of investigations, helping dozens of families recover stolen assets and achieve justice. Monica joined the foundation as a counselor after completing her own therapy journey. Her experience being manipulated by my parents gave her unique insight into helping others who'd been coerced into betraying loved ones. We developed workshops on recognizing and resisting family financial predators, drawing on our painful first-hand experiences. The program gained national recognition for its innovative approach to preventing elder abuse. Elena Rodriguez, my former nanny, became part of my chosen family. Her courage in coming forward despite immigration fears inspired me to fund legal services for domestic workers facing exploitation. She now manages our foundation's whistleblower protection program, ensuring others who witness abuse can report it safely. At the program's launch, she said, "No child should suffer in silence because their caregiver fears deportation." My return to the corporate world came through connections made during the trial. Tech executives who'd followed the case recognized both my business acumen and integrity under pressure. I joined a startup focused on financial security for seniors as chief operating officer. The company's mission aligned perfectly with my new calling to protect vulnerable populations from predators, whether family members or strangers. Dorothy's Greenwich estate became the foundation's headquarters after extensive renovations removed all traces of my parents' brief occupation. We converted it into a training center for elder abuse investigators and a retreat for families healing from financial betrayal. The gardens where Dorothy and I once walked became meditation spaces for survivors processing trauma. Her presence permeates every room, reminding us why we fight. The ripple effects of exposing my parents' crimes spread throughout Connecticut's elite circles. 3 other families discovered similar exploitation after seeing our case publicized. We helped them recover millions in stolen assets and prosecute their own predatory relatives. The Greenwich Police Department underwent major reforms after the corruption investigation, implementing new protocols for handling family financial crime reports. Speaking engagements at legal conferences and elder care facilities became part of my advocacy work. Sharing our story helped other families recognize warning signs before losing everything. I always emphasized Dorothy's foresight in documenting abuse, encouraging audiences to protect themselves with evidence. The most rewarding moments came when audience members approached afterward, finally understanding they weren't alone in their experiences. Dating seemed impossible after Derek's betrayal, but prosecutor Daniel Kim changed my perspective. He'd volunteered to assist with the criminal trial after following the civil case, impressed by our thorough documentation. His integrity and dedication to justice made trust possible again. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values about protecting the vulnerable. When he proposed at Dorothy's grave, it felt like her blessing. Law school was a natural next step given everything I'd learned about the legal system's failures and potential. Studying part-time while running the foundation, I focused on elder law and financial crimes. My professors often used our case as an example of how documentation and persistence could overcome even systemic corruption. Graduating at 32, I felt equipped to fight for others as Marcus had fought for me. Tyler's transformation continued through art therapy and honest work. He got a job at a gallery, starting at the bottom and working up through merit rather than connections. His art evolved from entitled abstracts to powerful pieces about family dysfunction and redemption. When his first legitimate exhibition opened, featuring paintings inspired by our journey, I was proud to attend as his supportive sister. My parents' attempts to manipulate the system from prison failed spectacularly. They filed appeals claiming ineffective counsel, prosecutorial misconduct, and even elder abuse by the corrections system. Each motion was denied with increasingly harsh rebukes from judges tired of their tactics. When my mother tried organizing a prescription drug ring in prison, her sentence was extended. My father's attempt to hide assets through fellow inmates led to additional charges. The financial recovery allowed me to help others beyond the foundation's work. I quietly paid off the student loans of classmates who'd supported me during the crisis, funded scholarships for foster youth aging out of care, and invested in businesses owned by people overcoming family trauma. Dorothy's money, stolen and recovered, now served purposes she would have cherished, protecting the vulnerable and empowering the survivor. On the 5th anniversary of Dorothy's death, I stood at her grave with a gathering that represented my rebuilt life. Tyler beside me, genuinely sober and employed. Daniel holding our infant daughter, named Dorothy Elena in honor of the women who'd saved me. Rosa and her family, Monica, Elena, Marcus, and dozens of others whose lives had intertwined with ours through tragedy and triumph. "You were right, Grandma," I whispered to her headstone after the others had gone. I was stronger than they knew. But more importantly, I learned that real family isn't about blood or money or maintaining facades. It's about choosing to love and protect each other, especially when it's hard. The afternoon sun broke through clouds as I placed fresh roses on her grave, their pink petals matching the ones in her favorite garden. The journey from victim to victor hadn't been linear or easy. There were nights I'd wanted to give up, accept their dirty money, and disappear. But Dorothy's faith in me, preserved in those carefully hidden recordings, kept me fighting. Now, helping other families navigate similar battles, I understood her final gift wasn't just the money. It was showing me that truth and persistence could defeat even the most entrenched corruption. Sometimes family is who you're born to, but sometimes it's who stands beside you in courtroom battles, who believes you when powerful people lie, who helps you rebuild when everything burns down. My parents taught me about betrayal, but Dorothy and my chosen family taught me about loyalty. That lesson, more than any inheritance, made me wealthy beyond measure. The $8 million was just numbers in an account. The people who'd fought beside me were priceless. Walking to my car, I saw my reflection in the window and smiled. That scared 28-year-old woman who'd entered a courtroom to face her parents' eye rolls had transformed into someone Dorothy always knew existed. Strong, resilient, and unafraid to fight for justice. My parents had tried to destroy me, but instead they'd forged me into exactly who I was meant to be. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the worst betrayals. If you've made it through this incredible journey with me, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to stand up against family members who betrayed your trust? What gave you the strength to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless? Please share your own experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you believe that truth and justice can prevail even against the most powerful opponents. Subscribe to hear more true stories of ordinary people overcoming extraordinary betrayals, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Share this story with anyone who needs to know they're not alone in their family struggles. Remember, sometimes the family you choose is worth more than the family you're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always find the strength to fight for what's right, just as my grandmother Dorothy believed I would.